The eyes being windows to the soul is a sentiment shared across time and culture. Beyond the personality, the psychosocial, and the emotions, there is a veritable reason why the eyes are windows to the soul. When we consider that the notions of the soul is the microscopic processes of the body, then the eye is a sort of microcosm of what's happening in the body. Iridology is this in practice. It proposes that different parts of the iris of each eye reflect different parts of the body, specifically in terms of health, not just organs, but entire systems like the endocrine system or the nervous system. The idea is that the eye has reflex responses to everything going on in the body. It's an alternative medicine practice, and it's not necessarily fully figured out. Every single eye in the world, even between your left and right eye, is unique, just like a fingerprint. But the body may still have a way of expressing, even through cause and effect, different potential ailments or happenings in the body. I'm not going to go too far into specifics. You can check out different books or websites online, whether you want to see things for or against this practice. I just wanted to point this field of study out, because everything in the body is related. Every mark, every line, every dot on the body has a reason and a cause for that. This does nothing more than propose that it is possible to see where these marks come from within the iris. I think iridology's main problem is that it limits itself to the iris. What I mean by this is iridology is limiting itself to just the iris. I think the concept of iridology is solid, but it needs to explore the eye as a three-dimensional object. This is something that's possible through entoptic phenomena. There are many different entoptic effects, but the idea is that you're seeing inside the eye. It's not a hallucination, it's a visual phenomena where you see things you normally can't see that are dwelling within the eye. The example that we've all probably seen are these floaters. Another effect is Purkinje trees, which are seeing your own blood vessels. There's a variety of different entoptic effects. It's all just dependent upon the right lighting and the right setting with the right background. This book was recently brought to my attention. It's called Microbes and Other Shamanic Beings. This book explores the microbial understanding of Amerindian shamans. The main arguments he lays out: first, since their earliest accounts, Amerindian shamanic notions have had more in common with current microbial ecology. Second, the human senses allow the unaided perception of the microbial world, for example, entoptic vision. Lastly, the theory that some diseases are produced by living agents. The author lays the fundaments for ethnomicrobiology. Obviously, this is in view of purely Amerindian beliefs. My argument, of course, is that all ancient religions, mythologies, and folk practice is in some way interacting with this microbial ecology. I'd also add that the nose is another direct way in which we interact with the microscopic. But it's interesting to see other parallel theories, especially ones that go into a specific culture or subset of cultures. But to demonstrate everything in this video, we're going to look at some of the oldest surviving texts on medicine, that being from ancient Babylon. The Mesopotamians viewed disease as a consequence of an interaction with the outer world, and concretely as a contact with external agents such as gods, demons, or ghosts. Disease was understood as a possible unfortunate event that could have affected the individual, just like a loss of family, wealth, or social esteem. Experiencing fortune and misfortune depended on the relationship between an individual and his personal god, what I would think of as the holobiont or the microbiome. When angered, the latter would cease to bestow favor on his protege, leaving him unshielded from adversity. And so the divinatory diagnosis involved identifying the causative demon, god, or ghost that led to misfortune or disease. Just as Amerindian beliefs and practices were mislabeled or misunderstood through a different culture's idea of those things, it's important to not just judge something as primitive only because it does not correspond to the dominating Western concept of science. The analysis of both technical and terminology and metaphors reported in ancient medical texts is most promising when set in historical and intellectual context, rather than labeling the symptoms described in ancient sources with modern diagnostic nomenclatures. In the same way, when we say these cultures believed in demons, ghosts, and magic, we don't fully understand those terms in their context. In effect, it is technically incorrect to refer to these Akkadian medical incantations as magic. which itself is a problematic term and concept. There is no term for magic in Mesopotamia, and even Greeks and Romans borrowed this term from the Persians. So magic comes from magi, and magi were Chaldean wise men. The bulk of their knowledge was in plant pharmacology, and of course within their scientific practices that was related to astrology and divination and omen reading. So this idea of magic that we retroactively apply to ancient cultures is indeed just pharmacology and other microbial and microscopic interactions. Again, that practice in context of their cultural and scientific beliefs. The human body, and mainly the skin, was an object of divination, and specifically of its subspecialty physiognomy, the occurrence of cutaneous imperfections and lesions that did not conform with an ideal and normal appearance were interpreted therefore as divine signs, carrying messages that the gods supposedly impressed on the human body to be read. That such imperfections can be defined as signs and their interpretation as reading is particularly fitting. Also, it reminds us of a telling metaphor on dermatological diagnosis at the beginning of one of the main atlases in use today. That quote being, "Reading the skin is like reading a text. The basic skin lesions are like the letters of the alphabet. Their shape, color, margination, and other features combined will lead to words, and their localization and distribution to a sentence or paragraph. Everything in the body is going to have an effect. If you have yellow eyes, you're jaundiced, or you have a B12 deficiency, or your nails develop a certain way, or your hair develops a certain way. These are all signs of different things. Iridology is essentially arguing the same thing as this. The Mesopotamian belief is that man was molded from clay, and therefore the fact that this material was culturally believed to be the constituent matter of man is not surprising. What is indeed surprising is that terms referring to wounds derive from the semantic domain of writing, thus implying the same belief. Not simply as being made of clay, but also functioning in some respects like an inscribed clay tablet. Gods were not only viewed as the makers of mankind, generally placing signs on a man's body, they were also believed to shape tablet men and inscribe them with their divine messages to be read and interpreted by mankind in the same way as other forms of divine messages placed by the gods in heaven and earth. This is the idea of physiognomy. That article was on the skin or the dermatology of ancient Mesopotamian medicine as well as the cultural understanding. These next parts are from a book called Mesopotamian Eye Disease Texts. Just as physiognomy played a role in the diagnostic process in ancient Babylon, so too did iridology. These have also been seen in ancient Egyptian, ancient Chinese, Japanese, and Amerindian cultures. It's mainly talking about how they viewed different pathological conditions and the etiology of how those issues came out, as well, of course, there are different ways of treating those diseases. This part was particularly interesting. What is of primary concern to Tablet 2 is the appearance of eye pathologies, or brambles appearing in the eye, which are not known from elsewhere, or flesh-like lesion, or perhaps growth in the eye. None of these can be identified with modern diagnoses. I do wonder if they're describing floaters and other entoptic phenomena. A group of subsequent prescriptions share variations of the same symptom of the eye being full of moving tissue, perhaps indicating some type of tumor, with variations being that the tissue keeps moving, or that the diseased eye is full of tissue and blood. The final symptom is that the eye is full of worms. These worms are usually associated with the digestive tract, but this description is likely to be metaphoric for observable patterns of eye lesions, similar to the presence of brambles in the eye mentioned above. I think they are underestimating the ability to entoptically diagnose different issues. If there is an infection that is systemic in the body, it will certainly show up in the eye, and if you're able to entoptically see that, you might know something about that infection. There's another interesting incantation against the kernel of barley. We're talking about grain dust getting in the eye once agriculture was getting bigger and bigger. The key part of the incantation is, "Whom shall I send to the daughters of Anu of heaven?" This phrase remains unresolved, since the celestial daughters of Anu remain anonymous, while at the same time this designation frequently refers to the notorious baby-stringing Lamastu demon. They talk about how the eyes were called sisters and were separated by a mud brick wall or mountain, the nose. It is clear that facial physiognomy is being cast in landscape imagery. Perhaps that's in reference to the sinuses being either blocked or runny. Thanks for watching. Here's a cool eye stone.